Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Lizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Lizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Lizabeth Bachman.
Hello, and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. This is Lizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we talk about how you can use presentation skills to move your listeners to take action. Whether you are speaking in a meeting, on a stage, or just one-to-one with somebody influential, the tools of speaking can make an enormous difference about how effective you are. This is also about leadership and visibility and things that we need to know to be the sort of person who's asked to give their opinion. So leadership and visibility and how do you get promoted? How do you cope? Today, my guest is Lizabeth Wesely-Casella. That's Elizabeth like me without the E. And she is a communications specialist who talks about team communication, especially remote teams, and what you need to know to manage your remote teams. Before we go to the interview, I'd like to invite you to take our free assessment. It only takes 4 minutes. It's at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com, and that's where you can see where you are strong in your presentation skills and where you might need a little bit of support. And now, on to the interview. Thank you so much to Lizabeth Wesely-Casella, who is my guest today. And Lizabeth, I'm so happy to have you on Strategic Speaking for Results.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've been excited. This is great.
Good. Well, here I am looking up your very impressive bio. Lizabeth Wesely-Casella is the founder and CEO of L12 Services, LLC, which is a firm specializing in internal communications training, online business management, and executive virtual assistance. She's a strategic advisor who helps leaders identify where they can increase efficiency and effectiveness, not the same thing, right?
That's true.
And overcome challenges related to scaling, process systems breakdown, and workflow management. And here's something cool about Lizabeth. In 2014, she organized and led the process and communication change for First Lady Michelle Obama's signature program, Let's Move. That's very cool. I want to ask you about that. So today, she uses her communication, collaboration, and lean process design skills to identify where businesses can overcome bottlenecks and systems breakdown through clear internal communications practices. The bottom line is she helps clients regain the headspace they need to think creatively and become the leaders that their organizations deserve. So Lizabeth Wesely-Casella, thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you. I want to ask you about working for Michelle Obama, but before that, but maybe you could do that in context. But before that, I want to ask you, who would be your dream interview? If you were to share the stage with somebody from history, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
I actually am going to roll old school with this. I would love to share the stage and ask questions of Benjamin Franklin.
Ooh,
I find him to be fascinating. Not only was he a founding father, but he also was a rascal. He had quite the sense of humor. And let's just say in delicate company, he had quite a social circle, many, many friends. And he is one of those American stories where he took charge of his life and built himself up from very meager beginnings. So if I were to ask him any questions, it would probably be, and relating it to right now, I would probably ask him what it was like to experience imposter syndrome back in that day and age, and maybe what it would be like for him to understand more about, or to explain his viewpoint on, diverse populations and how diversity impacts decision making, because he was quite the collaborator and coalition builder, and that's why I really admire him.
Yeah, well, and as a fairly entitled man of the 18th century, he would have probably thought, well, diversity, that means like somebody from Virginia versus someone from Pennsylvania, right? Like a white man from Virginia versus a white man from Pennsylvania.
Actually, I was thinking more on the international stage with all of the work that he did in France and with people of various races. I believe that he was a front runner in understanding diversity in race and nationality. So that's why I think that he kind of speaks to the times that we're in, since it's a world that's wide open to all of us.
Well, that's a very cool interview. You have to send me the recording.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about, you've talked about your what, where, when, and how of good internal communications. I'm mostly talking about how people communicate from themselves to others, and how do you move listeners to take action. But you're talking about much more than the conversations, right?
I'm talking about how conversations can impact work process and improve it, as well as work culture and the business ecosystem. So we call the what, where, when, and how the 4 pillars. And it really boils down to, what are you communicating? Where are you communicating it? When are you communicating it? And how are you communicating it? And attending to each of those is really important and can help make or break whether or not your teams function well, or whether the processes that they work within are streamlined and effective and efficient.
Well, certainly if there's a streamlined process, that makes everything go better. That's for sure. We've all been in situations where there is no process.
That's true.
Yeah. If you ever worry about the value of a process, remember sometime when you had no process and what a chaos that was. So what are the what, where, when? Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Of course. So what are you communicating? If you look at your business holistically, generally to the industry or the size of your organization, you'll know whether or not what you're communicating is reporting or idea generation. If what you're really doing is talking about status of projects, getting a handle on what you are transferring as far as information from person to person or department to department is very important, because the next piece that it builds on is, where are you communicating it? You need to do a platforms assessment, which sounds, like it would pertain to larger organizations, but really organizations as small as 2 people can have a platform assessment that helps them function better. And it's really just policy surrounding where you communicate, the type of communication that you're exchanging. So are you using Slack or text as short bursts of information that are critical and timely? Are you using email for larger reports? Are you using the platforms that house your ideas for project management, such as Trello or Asana, in either the proper way or a consistent way? You don't always have to use these platforms in their proper ways, as long as you're using them in a consistent manner, so everybody knows what to expect where.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Oh yeah. That's really a challenge. It's a challenge with my friends, actually. So that's the what and where.
Then the next is the when. And it used to be that this was, I would say, the skinniest of the pillars. We used to talk a lot about making sure that direct reports and staff were in alignment with regard to time that you were dedicated to be, in front of your computer. But now what we're really talking about, and this is important because the next big wave of concern with regard to businesses is going to be burnout, if it isn't already.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking to organizations about creating well-defined policies that are repeated and sent out regularly that talk about, we'd like you in your job here, but we really want you to attend to your life outside these hours. We want you to be doing your laundry, helping your kids with school, walking your dog, whatever it is that helps you lead your best life. We are giving you permission to turn off your electronics at these hours and go and attend to yourself. By doing that, they're helping people to get more involved in self-care, to be more involved in their family, and to avoid using work as an opportunity to hide from the news. That, of course, it's ubiquitous. And when you have busy work and you have work that you can focus on, you can sometimes tune those things out. Find other coping skills. Work shouldn't be that place. And then how are you communicating? Is your communication supporting your business goals as well as your business culture? So if you are communicating with emojis, does everybody understand that emojis are just for within the office and your team, or do you also show them to your external clients? Or all caps? Does everybody on the team understand that all caps means that you're excited rather than they're getting yelled at? I mean, you need to talk through these different pieces. So those are the 4 pillars to just kind of boil it down to an easy, postscript.
So what was it like with all these 4 pillars? What was it like working on a project with Michelle Obama?
Well, I need to clarify. I've never met Michelle Obama. That is still a future goal, but I know, right? But I am very proud of the work that the coalition that I built did in order to help further her messaging with regard to health programs. What we did at that point, I was very deeply involved in advocacy for weight stigma prevention and eating disorders. And we realized the Let's Move program hadn't included either of those stakeholders in the conversation when they built out the program. And so there was language that was contributing to weight stigma and weight bias and was not inclusive of potential eating disorders that children were having. And it actually contributed in some cases to lowering the age where you would traditionally see eating disorders. So we came around and did a little bit of cleanup on that, and we were lucky enough to catch the attention of the office and help them put together implementation guidelines for the state level and roll out some buffing and some polishing on the original program.
Cool. All right. So why does remote team management need to be treated differently from in-house team management? So we're recording this during the shutdown. The COVID-19 pandemic is still raging. It's August of 2020. So many of us are remote anyway. Why does managing a remote team different from from an in-house team?
Traditionally, when you have an in-house team, you have the benefit of eye contact and physical proximity. Remote teams obviously lack that. Even through Zoom, body language is lost to about, they're estimating 75%. So being able to read each other and to build relationships is much more difficult. From the research that my organization has done over the last 6 months, both for our internal clients and external clients, we found that the largest number 1 complaint is that people are missing the brain power. They're experiencing brain drain because people don't have those hallway conversations they used to. And you can't replicate that in a meeting environment. Those are spontaneous, they're chatty, they're all about idea generation, a little bit of brainstorming, one thing connects to the other. So in a remote environment, it's important that to replace physical proximity and to replace eye contact, that you have more frequent and more personal check-ins. There's such a thing as, Zoom fatigue and meeting overload. So finding the balance within an organization very attentive to the culture of the organization itself means finding a balance between too much business, too much Zoom, and not enough contact and not enough empathy. So it's really, the 4 pillars are a way of figuring out what the landscape looks like and then trying to amplify or increase opportunities for people to have meaningful engagement. Yes, it's important to have clarification and clarity on what your processes are, but at the human level, that's really because of COVID where a lot of organizations are finding they need to nurture and rebuild and create a stronger foundation. That's why you're seeing a lot of activity in the DE&I space and a lot of
so diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes, thank you.
Because?
Yes. Because the foundation and the culture of your organization and the mission and what it stands for is more important now than it was, specifically because people are looking for a reason to be loyal. They're looking for an answer to what their hard work is paying into. Without the cultural aspect, the work aspect becomes more of a drone. And people aren't looking for that right now. They're looking for meaning in their life, and they're looking to define success and align themselves with what the mission of their organizations are.
That's true. Do you have any suggestions for how to manage managers? I know many of the people I work with are very high level senior directors and C-level people, and they are taking an extra maybe 1/3 of the time to nurture their teams, which means that's a third, that's time that could not be spent on business processes. And a lot of them have then superiors who are saying, how come you're not producing as much? Why are you just on the phone all that time? Do you have an answer for that?
Well, from my experience, priorities are changing to the degree that conversations about what is important and what can be maybe pushed off to the next cycle are more readily had than they were prior to the COVID experience.
Okay.
I think that our really good leaders right now are very invested in their people, and they understand that that is the resource that is going to keep them going in the near and the long-term future. So they're looking to retain high talent and high caliber workers by making sure those people feel honored, feel successful, and have clarity of purpose and goals in mind. I haven't had any of our clients push back on the idea of readjusting some of their priorities and dedicating time to those leadership functions. But we have had conversations where we package that near-term personal development piece with very precise and specific steps that we want to take, say, next quarter or first quarter of next year, where we say, and now once we've really established a good, strong loyalty and a good, strong bond, and we know we have the people and the team in place, people aren't going to be, there's not going to be attrition due to confusion. Here's where we're going to focus next. And then we talk about where the system may be breaking down, where the bottlenecks are. And we can plan in advance on our end within my team to help make a transition that's almost seamless. So it's really more a matter of training than focus groups and surveys and having to do that digging in part when we get to that following quarter.
Okay.
It's kind of like you do your work, we'll do our work, and then we'll come together and make a beautiful bouquet.
So do you do that part, the setting that up and the communication strategy like that?
Yes, I'm very hands-on with that. I am involved in every level of that process, from doing a review of existing documents and policy and procedure, as well as surveys and focus groups and, I don't want to say coaching of leadership, but definitely having conversations with leadership, providing them resources that are current and some trends that we may be seeing about, where their priorities should lie, maybe what some best practices are, and listening. Listening is the biggest part of my job.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. When we had our preliminary call, you mentioned something about policy and making sure that there's a policy for communication. And then I mentioned that to a friend, and he said, why do you have to have aren't policies like for big initiatives, company-wide initiatives? Why do you have to have a policy just for sending an email? So how do you respond to that one?
I just wrote a blog post about this the other day, why creating policy early on, even when you're small, matters and helps to magnify your opportunities in the future. When you have, and they may not be standard operating procedures, they may be sloppy operating procedures to start with, and that's okay. But when you start documenting how you use technology, what steps it takes to make it from A to Z within a process, you then have the ability to, let's say you do get sick with COVID, you have the ability then to take those responsibilities that are normally yours and give them to somebody else and reduce the amount of time that it takes for them to get used to what that process is or to onboard. Beyond that, it also gives everybody a place to start from and to understand the organization. Let's say you're bringing on new team members. For me, last year, I brought on 4 team members within 6 months. So it was a matter of just rinse and repeat, get everybody up to speed as fast as possible. Being able to give people a set of guidelines that say, this is how we work, and we would love your input if you find that this doesn't work for you or you think of a better way, because these documents are always growing. They're organic. They grow with us. Helped me save enormous amounts of time answering questions, giving directions, having to, whether on Slack or email, rewrite the same messages over and over about how is something done.
That's really great. Do you have any thoughts about where should one start as a manager? If you're feeling like, there's so many things to organize, I mean, besides hiring you, right? But if we could start with one thing, what would be the one thing to start with?
Well, I always go back to my lean process skills, and I believe that the first thing to do is bring the team together. Talk about what works, talk about what doesn't work, and then make a plan. If it's that an entire department doesn't work, maybe you bring in a moderator, an external moderator, to hold a focus group so that they can talk within their little cell about what the process should look like, which may be a circle, and what it actually does look like, which may be a plate of spaghetti. And then everybody can help unwind those threads and noodles together so that you do get something streamlined and quite possibly improved upon the original idea of what that process should look like. If it's not department specific, if it's organization specific, then I say appoint people from every level, and that's important, every level of the organization, not just leadership, not just worker bees, everybody. Have them come together in their own type of working group and start to talk about how each of the levels or departments has interdependent workings, and maybe that's where the process breaks down, and that's where those brainstorming and solution sessions can come in. And from that, you'll be able to then start to document as things move forward and progress, and then, document, test, rewrite, document, test, rewrite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's really helpful. How does that support morale?
When people understand what success looks like, they are far more comfortable reaching for it. And it's been scientifically proven that that's where innovation happens. When people understand what success looks like out here, and there's a gap between the two, a comfortable, loyal staff member will get creative. If they know that it's not about just doing the job to the specs that you have in order to get to that goal line, but if it's we want to see the best product we can at the goal line, they will go to their managers or their teammates, and they will start to model innovative behavior. And they'll talk about ideas, and they'll talk about creativity, and they'll bring discussions to the table, and they'll be the nexus. So then they become the knowledge holder. And with that knowledge holder comes power and influence, and not, power in the icky way, but power in the way that says, I now have, statistics and experience that informs the decision that I made. And I can talk to decision makers, leadership, management, and say, here's our idea, and this is why the idea will work. And that saves so much time, and it helps a person feel very invested in their job.
That's wonderful. Well, Lizabeth Wesely-Casella, this has been so cool and interesting. Do you have a final thought to leave us with, now that we're all living in this virtual world these days?
Lead with empathy, and empathy is different than sympathy. Lead with the knowledge that we are all going through challenging times, and we are all being innovative, trying to solve our own problems. Our problems may be work-related, they may be home-related, they may be, related to society as a whole. But keep your mind open and your heart open. Definitely keep looking at the details, but do what you can to be supportive by being engaged and putting yourself in the other person's shoes, because someone you may discount right now or not give the benefit of the doubt to right now, down the road may actually be one of your biggest champions and one of your star team players.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for being on Speakers Who Get Results. That's the podcast, Strategic Speaking for Results. I do that to myself. Did that to myself there. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I certainly hope to learn more about this.
Well, thank you. It's been delightful.
Thank you. So this has been a Facebook Live. This interview is going to come back as a podcast later on this year. So you get 2 chances to hear Elizabeth. Thank you so much. And just to remind you, if you're interested in how your presentation skills are going, you could take our free assessment. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. That's speakforresultsquiz.com. It takes 4 minutes, and that's where you can see where you are rocking your presentation skills and where maybe you might want a little bit of support. This has been Lizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Lizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.